asking the questions mainstream journalists will never ask. This is your Richie Allen Show on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, and triggerwarning.tv.
Time is pressing. I think it is pressing anyway, so much there is to talk about today. Hope you've had a good old day. Hope you're in good form. I'm sure your head's spinning with everything that's going on, not just in Syria, outside Syria, but in lots of other places as well. All sorts of things going on. Did you hear Catherine Drew there? Because you might just be coming home from work and you mightn't have seen the news or heard the news that Yulia Skripal, the daughter of the double agent Sergei Skripal, she's been discharged from hospital. This is a very bizarre story. And I have to wonder, when Theresa May addressed Parliament a few weeks ago and said that it was very, very unlikely, or I think May said, to quote her properly, she said it was highly unlikely the Skripals would ever recover. Was May saying that because either her office or maybe the Home Office had been in touch with the doctors treating the Skripals? Because I don't think that was the case. I don't think the folks treating the Skripals told May or Amber Rudd the Skripals were unlikely to recover. I think May, being a psychotic, sociopathic, pathological liar, was just making it up as she went along. Well, anyway, what's happened is they've taken her out of hospital. She left hospital yesterday, apparently, and was taken to a secure location. The hospital said today that it isn't the end of her treatment, but it does mark a significant milestone. And you might have heard Catherine at the top of the hour saying that Sergei, her dad, remains in hospital. Doctors hoping that he will be discharged in due course. Will anybody get access to the Skripals, I wonder. We talked on Sunday View about the possibility that they'll be spirited away across the Atlantic to the United States and given some sort of witness protection. Wow. It doesn't... you think you've seen it all. I've been around a long time. I've said this before. You think you've seen everything. You think you've heard every lie, every shakedown, every con, every snake oil sold. You think you've seen it all, and then something like that comes along. Anyway, shall we talk about the big story of the week, and a major story developing, of course, over the last few days. Now, the US President Donald Trump has cancelled his first official trip to Latin America. He was due to head off to Latin America. Why has he cancelled it? Well, he said he needs to focus on the issue of the chemical attack in Syria and the response to it. The White House press office said Trump will remain in Washington to oversee the American response to Syria. That's a direct quote. The American response to Syria. The Russians have been warning, of course, as they might well do, that the United States and the United Kingdom and France should tread very carefully in terms of any military response in the country. The Global Chemical Weapons Watchdog has said it will send a fact-finding team to the site in Douma. This is the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, the OPCW. They said a team would deploy to Syria shortly. The Russians said absolutely. And the Syrians said absolutely. Let them in and let them investigate. So there's where we are at the moment. Trump was meeting with the Emir of Qatar today. He's a man called Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. Had to practice that a few times, so it's worth saying it again just to make up for it. Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the Emir of Qatar, was sitting with Trump today. You'll hear him first. Here's only a smidgen of what they had to say about Syria.
Of course, we speak today and we see the suffering of the Syrian people. And me and the President, we see eye to eye that this matter has to stop immediately. We cannot tolerate with a war criminal. We cannot tolerate with someone who killed more than 500,000 of his own people. And this matter should end immediately. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. And Tamim and I have been working for a number of years now, actually, even before the fact, on terrorism. And we're making sure that terrorism funding is stopped in the countries that we are really related to because I feel related. But those countries are stopping the funding of terrorism. That includes UAE, it includes Saudi Arabia, it includes Qatar and others. A lot of countries were funding terrorism and we're stopping it. It's getting stopped and fast. Very important.
What's he talking about?
You've now become a very big advocate, and we appreciate that.
Trump is as mad as a box of frogs. Trump, I figured out, is like that senior relative that we all have, who, God loves him, hasn't a dicky bird as to what's going on, hasn't the foggiest idea, is completely clueless. What was he talking about there? Right, that was Trump, who's not gone to Latin America because he's going to oversee the US response. And you heard the Emir of Qatar there as well. So what about Theresa May today then? Well, she met with her cabinet and the heads of MI6, other foreign policy experts. They all met today to chat about the UK response to the alleged chemical weapon attack. There you are. What is May likely to do? Well, here's Sky News reporter Lewis Goodall with his take on what May is likely to do. You will hear Theresa May at the end of this as well.
She's really got a dilemma. On the one hand, I suspect that she and much of the rest of the British security services and foreign and defence policy establishment would probably quite like to act in tandem with the American President Donald Trump. Why? Well, of course, one reason is that they're keen to try and preserve as much of a special relationship as possible, especially as we head towards Brexit, and they certainly would not like to see the spectre of President Macron, President Trump, essentially having the new special security relationship of the world. They want Britain to be around that table. There's also an element where they've been both surprised and heartened by the Americans' response in the wake of the Skripal attack and attempted assassination, and there's an element where I think they want to try and keep President Trump on side. On the other hand, really, what really matters is about the building behind me, because if the Prime Minister decides that she does want a coordinated attack, the recent precedent suggests that she would have to have approval from the House of Commons. Earlier on, Theresa May wasn't giving anything away, though. Here's a flavour of what she had to say.
We're working with our allies and partners to assess what has happened on the ground in Syria. It is a barbaric chemical weapons attack that has taken place, of course, illegal use of chemical weapons. I've already spoken to President Macron about this. I'll be speaking to President Trump about it later today. And of course, we'll be talking about this issue and including the discussions that are taking place at the Security Council of the United Nations.
Yeah, she's been talking to President Macron, and we know that Emmanuel likes a bit of mutton, doesn't he? I wonder how those conversations go. Mwinga noticed, by the way, as I noticed, that Trump made the statement while sitting next to the Emir of Qatar that he's been working with him on foreign policy issues for years. That's what I meant. Trump is as mad as a box of frogs. You know, any idea that anybody might have that Trump is running things, right? He's not. What's going to happen tonight then at 8 o'clock UK time? Nikki Haley, the US ambassador to the United Nations, will most likely tell the United Nations that the US will act with or without its blessing. Who cares about international law? Who cares about convention? To hell with that. If we want to go and bomb the absolute bejesus out of Syria, we will do just that. 'Twas a surreal day today. BBC Radio 4 invited Tony Blair on to speak to them. Now, to be fair, the reason they invited the mendacious one was because today is the 20th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. That's why Blair was on, but he didn't miss the chance to suggest intervening in Syria.
If you put the other point of view and you say, well, let's suppose we do nothing, then you really are giving carte blanche to the regime to do whatever is necessary to retake opposition areas by force.
But the fact is they're winning anyway.
They are winning, but they're winning because their outside backers are prepared to intervene and to commit. And frankly, we have not been able to. Now, you know, this...
Well, because we don't want to go to war with Russia.
Well, it's not just about going to war with Russia. It's because of the difficulties of intervention. As we know, as I know, it's extremely difficult. But the problem is non-intervention is also a policy with consequence.
Iraq
shows you that intervening is extremely difficult. But non-intervention, as we see from Syria, is also extremely difficult.
Blair must love doing these programmes because he gets an easier ride than if he went to Alton Towers, which has got the worst slides in the world, by the way, ever seen. Alton Towers slides, the worst ever. It couldn't be any easier for Blair, one of the greatest murderers ever to walk the earth, and not have his collar felt for it. It's so easy for him to traipse around, pop into Channel 4 News, do an interview with The Guardian, go to the BBC, no problem. Mad, isn't it? Tony Blair, eh? That was in The Independent today. He wrote a piece, or he was interviewed by The Independent, and they made an article from it. He was on BBC Radio 4 as well. Blair. Now, former US Congressman Ron Paul has been talking, Dr. Ron Paul. Now, Paul says he doesn't know who deployed chemical weapons in Syria, but to be fair, says Paul, Assad would be the last person he would suspect.
Well, the one thing is I don't know. I think the least likely would be Assad. This whole idea, Assad, and it's over and over again. I probably heard it 10 times today. Assad is gassing his own people, and they've said that every time it happens, Assad, and then a month or two later, they prove that was absolutely wrong. So I cannot see any reason why Assad would do this. There's no reason for Russia to have done this. There's somebody who wants to stir up trouble, and the people who want us to stay there. So we're getting, let's say there's a hint, there's a bone thrown out, we might leave, according to Trump. Well, no, we have to have a reason for staying. We're not going to let this happen. That's the problem. You know, the McCain's people say, oh, we left Iraq too soon, and that's what happened. ISIS came in. Well, of course, the evidence is pretty strong that we've been pretty friendly with ISIS, and we use ISIS to try to fight our battle. So somebody wanted to stay there. I think the policymakers here did not want us to leave, and somebody does it for them. But I just think this whole idea that all of a sudden that Assad's gassing his own people, I think is total nonsense.
Absolutely. We know they gave the rebels a whole stockpile of chlorine gas to use. The Russians talked about this on St. Patrick's Day. On Paddy's Day, told you about this, didn't I? We talked about it then. We talked about it on Sunday View. We talked about it yesterday. The Russians said, hey, listen, they're going to use chemical weapons and then they're going to use that as the pretext to launch attacks. We're just warning you, giving you the heads up. Yeah. Let me talk about the media just for a minute. Don't switch off. Please stay with me. I promise you this is the last time. No, do stay with me for a few minutes. I put an article on the website today entitled something about 15 years after the Iraq War, the media is still cheerleading something like that. And the reason I wanted to put that article on the website today was because I do have a memory like an old effluent. I have a memory like an effluent or an elephant. And I recall in the late 2000s and 2 years ago, so in the late 2000s, journalists wrote articles. They were kind of mea culpa articles. Journalists were saying, we were asleep on our watch in the run-up to the Iraq War in 2003. That was nice. Didn't take away from the fact that millions of people were killed because journalists were asleep on their watch, but it was nice of them to admit it. That was back in the late 2000s. I recall an article that was in The Guardian, but it's mysteriously disappeared. It was a Guardian editorial from the late 2000s where they apologised for their own conduct. Can't find it anywhere now. How strange. But anyway, back in 2016, pretty much 2 years ago, a guy called Ian Burrell wrote a very good article about the conduct of the media in the run-up to the Iraq War. Shall I read a couple of paragraphs? Because I'm well aware of the fact that you might have a lot better or much better things to be doing than reading my puerile claptrap on my website, my opinions. You mightn't have read it, so I'm going to read you what Ian Burrell wrote. Have a listen to this. Ian Burrell. He wrote, so much of the current public distrust in the media and its incestuous relationship with the political establishment can be traced back to its failures in covering the Iraq War. I remember picking up the London Evening Standard on September 24th, 2002 and being gripped by the raw power of its splash. 45 minutes from attack. Hours earlier in Parliament, Tony Blair had handed down his flawed tablet of stone with its false claims of Saddam Hussein's weaponry, and the media machine whirred into action propelled by Alistair Campbell's spin team. The following morning, The Sun told its readers that it was they who were Saddam's target. The headline, Brits 45 minutes from doom. The initial reporting showed how a supposedly free and fearless press was powerless, vulnerable and gullible in a moment of national crisis. Utterly dependent on Downing Street and Britain's intelligence chiefs for information it could not verify, it meekly fell into line with government propagandists. Burrell went on to write in The Independent 2 years ago, "The pressure on the UK media should not be underestimated. It seems extraordinary now that papers could have campaigned for the bloody mess that Iraq became. But at the outset, the operation was depicted by government officials as a humanitarian one, liberating the Iraqi people from oppression. Even liberal The Observer newspaper, to the horror of many colleagues on sister paper The Guardian, backed the case for war. In the US, the venerable New York Times was embarrassed as it swallowed fabricated evidence of Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, cynically supplied by members of the Iraqi opposition and pro-war lobbyists." That was a very powerful piece of writing and journalism by Ian Burrell in July 2016, and that was published on the back of the Chilcot report, John Chilcot's report into the events leading up to the Iraq War. And back in 2016, Burrell wasn't alone in coming out and saying, this will never happen again. We will never allow a situation like that develop again, where we are swallowing hook, line and sinker briefings from government ministers and reporting them as if they are fact. We let the country down. We let the military down, the young men and women who went to Iraq. We let the Iraqi civilians, a million of whom were murdered, and another several million who had to flee that country. We left them down. It won't happen again. Do you want me to give you a flavour of today's newspapers? Let me give you a flavour. The Guardian. After Douma, the West's response to Syria's regime must be military. That's Simon Tisdall in The Guardian. Do you want The Independent? Ironically, Tony Blair says UK should launch military action in Syria because non-intervention has consequences. The Chicago Tribune, the editorial, the price Assad should pay for gassing his people. Shall I go on? CNN, massive website, huge. Haley, as in Nikki Haley, says Russia's hands are covered in the blood of Syrian children. Shall I go on? The Daily Mail today, Assad's forces assassinated renowned war correspondent Marie Colvin and then celebrated after they learned their rockets had killed her. Lawsuit filed by her relatives claim. Wild speculation, none of it backed up by any proof. Assad's regime murdered journalists years ago at the outset of all of this madness, according to the Mail. The Telegraph, former leader of the Conservative Party, William Hague, in an opinion piece, we must learn from past mistakes and act now to stop chemical warfare. William Hague. The Sun. You've got a place in the sun. You've got a place in the sun. Do you remember that? You've us at it now. Theresa May vows revenge on Assad over horrific chemical attacks on little children. Won't somebody please think of the children? Reuters, one of the biggest news agencies in the world. Syria chemical attack is war crime, according to a human rights chief. This is today, dear listener. This is today. I wonder would Ian Burrell like to come on this programme and tell me about how it would never happen again. The New York Times, who were allegedly embarrassed by their own conduct before the Iraq War. Today, lead with the story, Bashar al-Assad knows what he can get away with. And there is a cynical picture of a man in a gas mask and a boiler suit holding a child to back up the article. You getting the picture? I'm going to keep going. Also in the Daily Mail today, Max Hastings. It is truly terrifying how many people will swallow Putin's lies amid Russian denials of complicity in the Syrian gas attack or the attempted murder of the Skripal's Max Hastings. What about USA Today? Syria's Assad picked the wrong time to launch a chemical attack on civilians. Shall I go on, or shall I leave it there? And ironically, I was thinking today, I would do a better job than these maniacs. Because if I wanted to achieve the same end as these monumental psychopaths, I would at least stick one or two stories in there with comments or with opinions of people who don't agree with the official narrative. I would say, if I was malevolent enough to be trying to spin a war on Syria, I would say, well, look, put a couple of articles in there, you know, give Galloway a ring, or I don't know, give somebody a ring who doesn't agree with this and give them a column. No, none of it. But Ian Burrell and a lot of other people, journalists, said to us in the wake of the Chilcot report it would never happen again. It's happening again. There's no dissent. I want to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to subject you to, without melodrama, without over-exaggeration, one of the worst, one of the most dangerous interviews I've ever heard conducted by a British journalist in my life. And I mean that. It was an interview with Johnny Mercer, who is a Conservative MP. I think he's based in Plymouth. He's a former soldier as well. Isn't it interesting? Toxic Tory Tom Tugendhat, and now we have Johnny Mercer. Isn't it interesting how so many soldiers, officers, are now finding their way into Parliament? Eh? Smedley Butler, anyone? Anyone mention Smedley Butler? I wonder, is there a coup? Is there, not that we have a Parliament worth defending anyway, we don't, but I wonder, is there a military coup underway with former officers of the British Army being picked to stand in elections and all of a sudden winning and ending up in Parliament? We'll hear from Johnny Mercer in a minute. This is Tuesday's Richie Allen Show. It is live on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 and triggerwarning.tv.
Introducing the H2O app, a powerful water structuring application that programs vibrational energies into water through the use of different sound frequencies. Once programmed, the use of water for drinking, cooking, bathing. Give it to your friends and colleagues or spread it around the garden. The list goes on. It's not just water that the app can be used for either. It's great for programming crystals too. The H2O app is free to download and is available on both Android and Apple platforms. For further information, go to h2oapp.online.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
The Richie Allen Show relies on your support. Go to richieallen.co.uk and set up a monthly donation today.
Welcome back. I think I'm onto something with former servicemen, particularly former officers, finding their way into politics. Something very sinister about that, I believe. Right, it's nearly hour. Let's just stay with this Russia-Syrian thing. A little bit later this evening, Nikki Haley, speaking of mad as a box of frogs, will basically lay an ultimatum on the floor of the United Nations and say either we get support for taking on the bastard Bashar or we'll go it alone. That's pretty much what's going to happen, I believe, a little bit later on. Shall we move on? Shall we move on? Okay. Let's move on then. So I mentioned before the break, Johnny Mercer is a Conservative Member of Parliament, former soldier. Now, he's a real beauty, is Johnny Mercer. He's been writing this week about how if we'd gone after Assad in 2013, when David Cameron lost a vote on military action in the Commons, well, we wouldn't be in this mess now. We should have went in or bombed the shite out of the Assad government in 2013. We wouldn't be in this now. So Kay Burley, surprise, surprise, had Mercer on. And Kay asked Mercer, and I want you to pay attention to what Kay says more than anything. She says, was he vindicated? Was David Cameron vindicated now in light of what's happening in Syria today? This is Johnny Mercer's response.
No, I mean, I feel desperately for David Cameron, for George Osborne and everyone involved in it. I think at the time I said I thought it would be perhaps the most profound foreign policy mistake we've made in the last decade, but I think it's probably going to be longer than that. So I think clearly, look, everybody understands the hangover from Iraq and the mistakes were made, but we kind of, we learn from that. We change, we establish a National Security Council, we make sure we never repeat the mistakes again, but it certainly doesn't mean we become a little Britain that just retreats and has this sort of insular view of itself. Our friends and our allies expect us to play a role. It's certainly concerning that France and the US, they're very strong on this, and we haven't really said we're going to stand shoulder to shoulder with them yet. I hope that's going to come out. This is, sometimes you have to stand up for what you believe in and what you think is right, and this is a clear moment for that.
Yeah. Just in case you missed it, he said he felt or feels desperately sorry for Bullingdon boys David Cameron and Gideon Osborne, just in case you missed it.
No, I mean, I feel desperately for David Cameron, for George Osborne and everyone involved in it. I think at the time I said I thought it would be perhaps the most profound foreign policy mistake.
Profound foreign policy mistake. And he felt desperately sorry that David Cameron didn't win the vote in the Commons in 2013. Hold on to that thought. Kay Burley was loving this. Remember her first question, was David Cameron vindicated? This is Kay's next question. There's been no clever or dodgy editing done here. I don't do that. The entire interviews are available on Sky's website even, and their YouTube page or channel, so I don't do that. This is her next question.
Who do you blame for our previous lack of intervention?
Wow. Who do you blame for our previous lack of intervention?
Well, I think we're all to blame in a way. I mean, certainly coming from the services, you sort of look on in amusement at some of the debates that go on and the detail that goes on. But if you look at the fundamental principle of Parliament having a say on foreign security issues, those decisions are made in full picture of all the intelligence that is never going to be revealed to Parliament, that is never going to be revealed to the public because you'll...
Yeah. These decisions are made using evidence that's never going to be revealed to the Parliament. That's never going to be revealed right, to the people, to the public. It's kind of a case of, if we tell you that this guy has bombed his own citizens, you're just going to have to believe it,
You'll burn your sources and the way you go about intelligence collecting.
And the reason we can't tell you, as he just said there, is because you'll burn your sources and you can't go about intelligence collecting. It's a wonderful scenario, that.
Ultimately, it's for the Prime Minister to make that decision. Now, I understand why David Cameron did that in 2013. The hangover from Iraq has been long and very, very painful and some serious mistakes there. But now we've got to move on. We've got to, get with the pace. Warfare is changing. Foreign policy is changing. We need to get with the pace, keep up, because otherwise we'll get left behind. And I'm not, like many of my colleagues, prepared to settle for a Britain that just settles into irrelevance. That's not who we are. It's not who we have been in the past. And, this is one of those issues that we need to step up to the plate on.
Yeah, don't forget, Mercer says intelligence will never be revealed to Parliament or the public to avoid burning sources. If we tell you Assad did it, then Assad did it. Now vote for war. And Burley is so hopelessly useless. She's incapable of challenging him. It gets worse. I asked you to remember the questions Burley asked thus far. She's asked 2 questions about who's responsible for not intervening and is David Cameron vindicated. Burley's 3rd question, you won't believe your ears.
The Prime Minister was not supported, David Cameron not supported by the Labour Party, which is the opposition, which is why that motion failed. How easily would you sleep in your bed if you were Ed Miliband?
Yeah. Have a listen again.
The Prime Minister was not supported, David Cameron not supported by the Labour Party, which is the opposition, which is why that motion failed. How easily would you sleep in your bed if you were Ed Miliband?
You see, Burley's next question should have been to Mercer, the warmongering Zionist Muppet former military officer. Well, Mr. Mercer, 1 million people marched against the Iraq War in 2003. In 2013, hundreds of thousands of UK citizens contacted their local MPs and told them that if they did vote to bomb Syria, they would be out of a job. Isn't it true, Mr. Mercer, that you don't have a mandate from the people of the UK to go about bombing the shit out of innocent people in other countries? Isn't it true, Mr. Mercer, that cry as you might about the lack of intervention, the public expressed very clearly in 2013 that any MP who voted yes for military action in Syria would lose their fucking job? What does Burley say, though? Instead of saying that which I said, and obviously without the bad language, she says this.
The Prime Minister was not supported, David Cameron not supported by the Labour Party, which is the opposition, which is why that motion failed. How easily would you sleep in your bed if you were Ed Miliband?
How easily would you sleep in your bed if you were Ed Miliband? Because Ed Miliband was the leader of the Labour Party at the time, so presumably Burley is insinuating it's Ed Miliband's fault because Labour didn't support Cameron. Officially, anyway. I think, if I remember correctly, and do correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Miliband used the whip. I think MPs were given a free vote on it, correct me if I'm wrong, but Miliband said he wouldn't be voting for an intervention. And Burley says to the warmongering MP, if you were Miliband, would you sleep in your bed? What did he say as a matter of interest?
Look, I have some private views on that, but I'm not going to make them public. I think it's pretty clear, I think, to everybody how that situation has materialised. What assertions he may give him before the recall of Parliament. I think where we are is a very sad place, and those are questions for him to answer.
Yeah. But you weren't that impressed.
Well, of course.
She just won't leave it go, will she, Burley, eh?
Well, of course not. The situation where we are now is horrific in Syria. It was horrific then as well. There were no easy options, but back then there was an opportunity. And in this country, we are very quick to become pious over Iraq and talk about how difficult foreign intervention is and how, there are no, clean outcomes. And so we shouldn't get involved. And it's just not the reality of warfare. If we are going to play a role on the world stage that many of us think we should, we need to understand how it's changed, advocate for the British people as to how it's changed, and show that we actually stand up for something on this. I suspect the US and the French are going to do that, and I'll be sorely disappointed if we don't stand shoulder to shoulder with them, and that they're aware of that at the moment.
The situation could have been very different in Syria if we had intervened previously.
Jesus Christ, Kay! Who's being interviewed here? Is it Mercer being interviewed, or is Mercer just a stooge being used by Sky News and Murdoch to reinforce a point? How many fucking times is Burley going to say we should have intervened, we messed up? The inevitable conclusion to that, the inevitable follow-up to that is, now we need to do something. This is not journalism. It's horrendous, this. Am I the only one to notice this at 4:30 of an afternoon? I've got to believe that other people watching this garbage are looking at it and seeing through it. Wow. Christ. In answering Burley's statements, because that's what they were those comments, not questions. You know, things would have been different if we had intervened even in 2013. Mercer amazingly says next, you're not going to believe your ears, that by not intervening in Syria in 2013, that was actually a worse foreign policy decision than invading Iraq. I'm shitting you, right? Wrong.
Well, I think it would have been different. It's hard to sort of look back to, with rose-tinted glasses and think things would have changed. I mean, clearly the situation has got a lot worse. That intervention, I think, was the biggest foreign policy mistake we've seen. I think even bigger than Iraq, which, we look back on now and look at the catalogue of errors that were made then. But, Tony Blair and people going through that process then, they were making deliberate decisions that they thought were in the best interest of what was going on. I think what happened with that vote in Syria is you had individuals who, some of them were entirely legitimate MPs who'd been asked to vote for Iraq and felt burned by that, and Libya and felt burned by that. And I entirely understand those, but I'm afraid there was a whole swathe of particularly Labour politicians who took the moment to sort of stand on the plinth and shoot down the government. And I think when you do that and you put the, your own personal interest before the national interest, you're going to end up in a pretty bad place. And certainly that's what's happened over Syria.
What a bloodthirsty bastard he is. Imagine not interjecting and jumping all over his contention that not intervening in Syria in 2013 and killing tens of thousands of Syrians with airstrikes was a worse foreign policy decision than killing over 1 million Iraqis and making 3 million more homeless based on a pack of lies. Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. He didn't. Saddam harboured Al-Qaeda. He didn't. They were his sworn enemies. Politically, religiously, lies. And you notice that Burley didn't interject a single time. But to be fair, Kay was holding fire till the very end. Till the very end. When she nailed Mercer with an absolutely devastating final question.
Did you prefer being a soldier or a politician?
That's a very unfair question, isn't it?
Yeah, good stuff.
It's time to play the music. It's time to light the light. It's time to meet the Muppet on the Muppet Show tonight.
Ba-dum-bum-bum-bum. Right, thanks for the tweets. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. This is your Richie Allen Show. It's exactly 17 and a half minutes to the top of the hour. Shortly, Dean Henderson will join the programme live from Missouri. Can't wait to speak with Dean. We'll talk about these issues and much more besides. Did you prefer being a soldier or a politician? Yeah. Right, let's move on. Israel's Labour Party, that's the Israeli Labour Party, they've announced that they've suspended relations with the UK Labour Party over claims that Jeremy Corbyn has allowed hostility to the Jewish community. Jeremy has allowed hostility to the Jewish community, so Israel's Labour Party has said no more relations. Good old-fashioned clean relations. No relations. In a letter to Corbyn, the leader Avi Gabay claims Corbyn has allowed anti-Semitic statements and actions. I thought Corbyn was very fond of the Palestinians. Obviously, I was wrong. Does the Israeli Labour Party leader, he accuses Corbyn of very public hatred of the policies of the government of the State of Israel. But what's wrong with that? Surely even Corbyn wouldn't deny that. Hey, Corbyn, you hate the Israeli government policies, you bastard. I do, as it happens, yeah. I do. Thanks for noticing. I'm here all week. That's what I would say if I was Jezza. I'm here all week, Avi. Christ almighty. Corbyn said the Labour Party in Israel should have had the courtesy to speak with him before severing relations. Before severing relations, he could have spoken with me. Corbyn referred to Shami Chakrabarty's report into anti-Semitism in Labour, and Corbyn said, I wish they would understand that we are determined to drive out anti-Semitism in every way from our society and where it exists in any party, including my own. In his letter, Mr. Gabay, the Israeli Labour Party guy, gets complicated, right? He said, and by the way, they're the Israeli main opposition party, he hailed the long history of friendship with UK Labour. And yet, he wrote in the letter, it is my responsibility to acknowledge the hostility you have shown the Jewish community and the anti-Semitic statements you have allowed as leader of the Labour Party in the UK. There will be a temporary suspension of all formal relations between the two parties. We cannot continue while you fail to adequately address the anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. Mr. Gabay says the policies of Israel's opposition party and the ruling coalition were aligned when it came to the security of our citizens and the actions of our soldiers who have just been taking pot shots at Palestinians unarmed of all ages, shooting down people unarmed, innocent people. Right. Corbyn has said allegedly that he wants an inquiry into UK arms sales to Israel. Maybe that's what prompted the letter today from the Israeli Labour Party. Jesus, 14 minutes to the top of the hour. Thanks for the tweets. Keep them coming in. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. At Richie Allen Show on Twitter. Hi to William Henderson, to Tony Allars. How you doing, Tony? To David Stanford, who said there's a special place in hell for Kay Burley. I don't know about that, David. I hold in contempt the people who watch it and believe it, more so than I hold Burley in contempt, to be honest. Sean McDonald tweets, same old agenda, just new faces. Mentioned Mwinga already. Cartoon drunk of Argyle, how are we doing there? Rob Allen says Burley ain't stupid. Short and sweet, Rob. Never said she was, Rob. Maybe I did I? I don't remember. If I did, of course, it was in anger. I don't believe she's stupid. Rich Mortimer, though, says, what an ignorant bastard. Right. Don't hold back, Rich. Hi to Charlotte Binns in Burnley, and to everybody else who's joining in on the old Twitter feed there. Do talk amongst one another. Share your opinions. And David Banner, who's been on the run since forever, has been tweeting at David_Banner. How you doing, David? I hope you've been calm, keeping calm, and you've not had to spend too much money on jeans, shoes and shirts of late. Zero evidence yet again, says David Banner. This makes me sick and angry. It makes me sick and angry too, mate. But you know what? Nothing is going to stop them bombing Syria and killing thousands of people and possibly triggering a third world war. Paul Craig Roberts, old friend of mine. Don't use the word friend too lightly. Not in this business. Paul has been writing today. Go to paulcraigroberts.org. He's been writing about this and he believes we're on the brink. And Paul is not a fearmonger. He's a very, very, very experienced civil servant, very experienced geopolitical commentator and financial expert, and he reckons we could be on the brink.